the truth, and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. Our common read book, The Moth Presents Occasional Magic, True Stories About Defying the Impossible, contains 47 stories that touch the heart. Speaking of defying, we may be weathering the worst pandemic in 100 years, but the students, faculty, and staff at SAC are not going to let it slow us down. Many hardworking people have contributed to make the 2-month-long LCR program a success, starting with Dean of Academic Success, Dr. Khan, whose idea it was. Thank you for being our champion, Dr. Khan. Thank you to College President Dr. Vela and Vice President for Academic Success, Dr. Blackwood, who I'm sure you've heard her story. She's quite the storyteller herself. And thank you to the entire college executive team for your support and opening your limited wallets to provide funding for participants to receive a hardback copy. Thank you to Jacob Martinez and the Office of Student Life for our support in providing substantial prize monies for our first, second, and third place SLAM participants. And thank you to Library Director Lee LeBlanc for his encouragement and weekly deadline reminders. We would not be here tonight without the enthusiastic participation of our faculty and their eager students. Please take virtual bows, Professors Yanni Bell, Nahima Ikala, Richard Farias, Stacey Evans, Kimberly Thornton, Marianne Bernau, I saw Marianne here, Patricia Portalis, Jeanette Bunch, Susan Falcone, Anna De Hoyos O'Connor, and community member Francis Hicks. The LCR includes 19 committee members, too many to mention everyone, but let me note and dote on just a few. Our co-chairs, librarians Eileen Oliver and Tom Ballinger, have worked tirelessly from May to today. This may surprise some, but it's not all glamour being a librarian. I recall one August afternoon when both were distributing copies in the 103-degree heat as students drove up in the Moody parking lot to get their personal copy. Our student committee member, Anita Campos, is a first-time in college student who graduated from Judson High School in 2001. Thank you for helping us, Nita. Committee member Dihanara, or Di Rios, is the Community Relations Coordinator for the Sinkin Eco Center. She is a recent participant in the Puro Slam Quarantine Invitational, open to the top 16 slam poets in San Antonio. Di has shared her passion for storytelling and her expertise by leading 4 workshops for our slam participants. At this point, I'm handing the slam baton into the professional hands of Di, who will be introducing our brave slammers, the judges, along with the rules of tonight's events. Good luck, slammers, and take it away, Di.
Thank you so much. All righty, so the way tonight's gonna work is we're gonna have each storyteller go. Their time limit is 5 minutes. In between storytellers, we'll have time for our judges to submit their scores. And then at the end of the evening, we are of course inviting you to come back tomorrow night for the conclusion of our slam and the award ceremony. So we're gonna get started. I will show you, I'll go over our slam rules. So one, as I mentioned, is we have a 5-minute time limit. We have a 10-second grace period after 5 minutes, but after that, then we start deducting points on the final score. Secondly, our slammers must use appropriate language, appropriate for what they'd use to campus. 3 is if you have any trigger warnings for your story, our competitors will let me know before I announce them. 4 is that all of these stories are nonfiction stories, but our storytellers will be creative in how they share their stories. And 5, we have several appearance requirements for storytellers so that we don't have anything that supplements our story. It's you and your voice, and that's going to really tell the story. And so those requirements include no props, no costumes, no PowerPoints, no background music, no costume makeup, and those all can lead to deductions on your score. So for our audience, your mics will be muted the entire time, but you are allowed to turn on video, and please do, so that the story can see our audience, see your reactions, see your faces. Please be courteous and respectful in the chat. Please feel free to make some noise in the chat and cheer for your storytellers tonight. And have fun and enjoy. And I hope you feel inspired by today's stories, and maybe you feel inspired to write or share your own. So, I quit too quickly. This is tonight's lineup of storytellers. So if you want to make a note, first up is Sophia, second Siobhan, 3 is Desiree, 4 is Billy, 5 is Michael, and 6 is Skylar. The remaining storytellers will present tomorrow night. And then we'll conclude with our award ceremony tomorrow night. Okay, and let's see. But actually, before we have our student storytellers tonight, we have what's called a sacrifice in slam. So the sacrifice is a non-competing storyteller who will be telling their story going first, so that none of our students have to be the first on the lineup. So here to warm up the crowd and to get you excited for tonight, our student storyteller first up is Nita. She's, as mentioned before, atypical freshman college student, yet a lifelong self-proclaimed theater geek. After traveling across the country for 10 years, she's very happy to be back at home in San Antonio and a proud member of the SAC community. She's happily married, and when not at school, she is the general manager of class axe throwing and Great Room Escape, and has a plethora of dogs and chickens to keep her busy. So without further ado, this is Nita Campos.
Thank you, everybody. So I have been a fan of musicals since I was a child. My mom and brother were big fans of musicals, so I spent a great chunk of my life singing all kinds of Broadway cast albums. I knew those songs way better than I knew all of the songs of the time. You know, the ones that made me relatable to other children, and, you know, the ones every other kid knew and was singing. I was always the oddball out unless somebody was singing Gloria Estefan or Michael Jackson. So it was, so leading up to this, it was a night that Dreamgirls was coming out in the movie theaters, and I was so excited. I went with my brother and his boyfriend, and we were headed to the first screening like the very first screening in San Antonio. So we were so excited. We were singing like the original Jennifer Holiday and I Am Telling You on the way there, and we were like finishing it in the car. We were so excited. So I had already, like, I knew that I was going to love this movie already, so I had already made plans to see it the next day. I was already going to go see it with my current boss, Michael Fletcher, who was the head of entertainment at SeaWorld at the time. And he wanted to see the movie too, so I had already planned to see it again the following day. So we got to the theater, and it was a completely sold out crowd. But luckily we got there early enough to get middle seats. So we're right in the middle of the audience. Everybody was excited. And so the movie began, and we were sitting there, and there was this girl, and she was standing on the left side of the theater, and she was singing like every song that was in the movie, because I mean, we all knew the songs, but she was even singing the songs that were not on the original Broadway cast album. Like, she went and looked up the new songs and was singing those, and I could tell that the woman behind me was starting to get really irritated, and to the point of, like, she was telling the people behind her, like, I could start to get a little nervous. So we get to the point when everybody in the movie is building up and everybody's singing, "If we all got pain," on all that part. And this girl kept going. And so now Effie's singing, "And now you're telling me it's all over." And the woman just snapped, and she had enough. And she kind of used my chair as a leverage to get up. So I was like, I was younger at the time, so I just went back with the chair, and she was like, shut the hell up. You ain't no Jennifer Hudson. And honestly, everybody in the whole building like just erupted with laugh, like just screamed. It was like a huge uproar. And so we all were like, woo! She did what we wanted to do literally the entire time. So they all stopped though just in time for the beginning of And I Am Telling You, which you really can't miss that, you know, like it's such a stark, anyway, theater thing. Anyway, so that girl stayed quiet for the rest of the movie, and we were happy about this. But the next day, I'm sitting at a table with my current boss, Michael, and we were having lunch before we were going to see the movie, and he said, you know, I knew Jennifer Hudson before she was Jennifer Hudson. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I gave Jennifer her first performing job. So she was a siren for Disney's Hercules back when I was casting for Disney. And so she'll always be just Jennifer for me. And that blew my mind, because I had been watching her on American Idol and I'd been watching her on Dreamgirls, and I loved her performance. And she eventually won an Academy Award for that performance. So it's a big deal. So not only was I working with someone that worked with Jennifer Hudson, but somebody who hired Jennifer Hudson for the first time. So it made me like really realize that no matter what you should do it with full passion and excitement. And you never know who you can possibly impress, and you can start the perfect opportunity at any time. So it could start at any time for anybody. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so judges, if you will submit your scores. So what's going to happen in between rounds like this is our judges will submit their scores on a spreadsheet we have in the background, and then we will and assess any penalties as needed. So I believe, unless I hear otherwise, that was within our 5-minute time limit, and there were no visual penalties for that performance. And lightning fast, all of our judges have submitted their scores. Thank you so much. So let's see. Next up, we have Sophia Farias. Are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
All righty. Sophia tonight is sharing a story called Forever Young. All right, and here you go.
Okay. So my family and I moved to New Braunfels from Laredo, Texas in August of 2007. I turned 9 years old the following May in 2008. And I'll never forget, after my 9th birthday party, my dad wanted to show me one of his favorite songs called Forever Young by Bob Dylan. But I believed in order to be a good singer, you needed to have a good singing voice. And which I thought was Bob Dylan's only shortcoming. And I get Bob Dylan's whole vibe now that I'm older, but at the time, not so much. So he tried again, playing the same song, but this time the version sung by Rod Stewart, which I really liked. So he played it for me 3 times in a row. And I remember him saying to me, Sophia, whenever you hear this song, and whatever happens to me, think of me when you hear it. Remember how much I love you and your siblings. A week later, we went to South Padre Island for Memorial Day weekend, and my father drowned in the ocean. We played Forever Young at his funeral. And at the time, I didn't fully understand death. In my mind, it endured in mystery, like a mountain, entirely unmoving on the horizon, covered by heavy fog. Many years later, my mom and I took a road trip to Colorado. And while we were driving through the Garden of the Gods, surrounded by majestic red rocks and mountains, we began arguing. And my mom and I are both a little passive aggressive. So I turned on the radio to calm down. And no matter how many times I changed the station, the only voice coming through was Rod Stewart's singing Forever Young. We both turned from bitter to amazed and grateful, as it should have been from the beginning. In a way, I felt envious of my older siblings for a while, and not for any other reason except all three of them had so many memories with our dad and gifts that he had given to them that they could pass from hand to hand when they missed him. The only thing he ever wrote to me was a birthday card that he gave me when I was 4 years old. And all he wrote was, "Love, Dad," in all capital letters. Before we moved out of our house in New Braunfels, we needed to sort through all my dad's belongings, most of which hadn't been touched or had only been touched by dust in years. And I found boxes and boxes of his old books on spirituality, philosophy, history, and politics, some of whose binding threads barely held the pages together, his thoughts writ all over the margins. And since nobody wanted them, I kept them. Now everywhere I go, I bring a library with me, as my dad would say, from beyond the beyond. That mountain looms on the horizon, growing nearer every day and still surrounded by thick fog. Of course, I mean, I don't know what death is like. But in whatever ways the universe works, I'm certain it has less to do with accident or coincidence than it has to do with subtlety and love. At 9 years old, I only realized death in a literal physical sense, the body, the tongue, and the eyeballs sinking into stillness. I now understand that death is not the end of life or a relationship. Not knowing what happens when you pass that threshold keeps you focused on the people and the moments that need us most in this lifetime. I may not have gotten to know my father while he was alive, but our bond grows deeper every time I flip one of those book's pages or sing along to his favorite song. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Judges, please submit your scores. Timekeepers, submit your times. And I want to say thank you again to our fantastic judges and timekeepers and all of the SAC staff who are helping to make tonight possible. In fact, I want to share with you about each of our judges in between the times that we're calculating scores in the background. So I'll tell you about one of our 5 judges is Chibi. Chibi is a Mexican-born, Texas-raised queer poet and actor. He is the founder of Laredo Border Slam, a founding member of Right About Now, 2-time San Antonio Slam champion, winning 3rd place at the 2017 National Poetry Slam Group Peace Competition. He has self-published 2 books and was the co-editor of the anthology Contra, Texas Poets Speak Out, which recently just came out. He has toured across the country performing his spoken word sets, and his work has appeared in Outsmart Magazine, the Latino Book Review Magazine, and has been featured online on We Are Mitu, George Takei, Slam Fine, Poetry Slam Inc., Button Poetry, and Right About Now. You can follow his adventures on Instagram at Gemini Eyes or get in contact on his website. And I will share those links in the chat as well. So thank you again to Chibi and to all of our judges who are helping us out tonight. So the way the scoring works is all 5 of our judges submit a score, and then we take any deductions as needed for time and for any visual penalties. But we are, Sophia was, her story was right in time, and all of that is good. So then the high score and the low score get dropped, and then the scores in the middle get averaged together. And that is what we go for the final rankings. So our scores and times are in, and if our timekeepers are ready, then may I introduce our next storyteller, who is Siobhan McGurk. The title of her story is My First Love, Trigger Warning for Physical Abuse. Go ahead and take it away, Siobhan.
I'm still trying not to cry from Sophia's story, so just bear with me a second. Okay, it was January 2016, and I had just joined a dating app after my 18th birthday. I matched with a guy who I found extremely attractive, and that was the beginning of the end for me that year. When things started, it was amazing. I had just moved to a new city, and I had an attractive and amazing boyfriend. He told me about how he grew up and where he was from in Utah. It was a small town called Hilldale on the border of Utah and Arizona. He was my first Valentine, and I fell fast and hard for him. It was not 3 weeks later that year before spring break, and he told me he was moving back to Utah to be closer to his family, and I understood that. But I didn't want him to go. So I asked my parents if I could go with him to Utah for spring break. They were hesitant at first, but they said yes eventually. So we spent spring break together in Utah, and it was great until I had to leave. I asked my parents if I could live with him for 6 months. And again, they were hesitant at first, but they said yes. It was great. I was back with my boyfriend, and I was happy. Till he started cheating. It began with him putting a code on his phone. One day in May, he was sleeping, and I figured out the password to his phone. And he had a message from it. A girl who said, "I love you" on Snapchat. I was so mad. I yelled at him to wake up. I yelled and screamed at him, trying to figure out why he was talking to this girl. This was the first time he put his hands on me. But it wouldn't be the last. He grabbed my wrists and shook me to be quiet and left bruises from how hard he was holding on to me. That day I should have left. But I didn't. Fast forward a couple weeks later, we got into an argument over something very stupid and minuscule. And that was when he slapped me to be quiet. I ran to our room and cried. He didn't run after me. I should have left then, but again, I didn't. So I stayed for 4 more weeks. I was messing around with our dog, or what he would say, his dog, and I didn't want to let him go to him. So I yanked my hair, pulled some of it out, and yanked me to the ground, and walked away with the dog and left me crying. He eventually came back to the house and comforted me and said he was sorry, but that was the breaking point of our relationship, and 2 weeks later I came back to San Antonio, broken, abused, and emotionally drained, just wanting anything to be whole again. I know everything he was doing was wrong, but I was in love. It has taken me till March of this year, when I found my amazing therapist, that I was able to find myself again and become whole. And for once, to forget about the good in the relationship, and most importantly, forget about the bad in him. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Judges, please submit scores. Timers, please submit times. And while our timers and our judges are getting all that in, let me tell you about another one of our judges, Eddie Vega. Eddie Vega is a poet, spoken word artist, and educator originally from the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, currently residing in San Antonio. His poetry has been displayed on via buses and downtown San Antonio buildings. In 2017, he was the runner-up in the Haiku Death Match at the National Poetry Slam. His first full-length collection of poetry, Chicharra Chorus, was published in 2019 by Flower Song Press. He is a co-host of the Words and podcast. He writes about food, Tejano culture, social justice, and the intersections thereof. Known as the Taco Poet of Texas, he can be found at an open mic, slam, or taqueria on any given non-quarantine evening anywhere throughout South Texas. Find Eddie on Twitter and IG as Alita Colico, and I'll post that in the chat as well. And I want to say thank you for the wonderful stories we've heard so far. And it takes quite a bit of courage to come up on the stage, virtual or otherwise, to share your stories. So I'm especially grateful to see all your courage and action by coming up here to tell your stories. So let's see. I'm gonna take a look at the scores and the times. If our timekeepers are ready, then one thing I'll note real quick is one of our competitors we had drawn for the lineup today has dropped out. So after Desiree goes, then it'll be Billy, then it'll be Skylar. So we still have a few more outstanding storytellers to hear from. Let's see, Desiree, are you ready to come up to the virtual stage?
Yes.
All right. So let's see. On the, looking for the button. There are lots of different buttons here for Zoom. Let's see. Okay. So coming up next with their story called Deserving, this is Desiree.
My earliest trauma began in childhood. I was in and out of schools, different homes, and battered women's shelters. I suffered terrible child abuse for many years. I would try to think of ways to behave with certain people to avoid harsh punishment. I hated drawing attention to myself, with him always there. I would select my vine, my switch, from our rose bush. It was a singular bush, huge and magnificent. Year-round, it provided large white roses that had attracted bumblebees and butterflies. I loathed it. I was made to bring the vine to him. I wrote my name down on a slab of wood with the date and the reason I was going to be whipped. I had to learn not to make any noise because if I cried out, it wasn't going to stop. By my early adulthood, I was a complete mess. I felt invisible. I was jealous of my coworkers who could literally talk about nothing and laugh hysterically at jokes that I didn't find funny or understand. I adapted, of course, to the role of outgoing, driven, and well put together citizen. As a young single mother of 3, I felt that my purpose was to provide for my children, please my supervisors, and keep a spotless house. This mentality lived and grew with me over the decade and became toxic. I had never had the opportunity to dream big. I never had the opportunity to plan my life. I had no idea what I really liked or enjoyed doing. My personal development at this point was stagnant. My heart was mourning. I was screaming, help me. I can't do this alone anymore. I just want to sit on the sofa and eat ice cream with my kids. I dedicated my time to my children and the workplace. So in our backyard, I made these ornate mazes for my kids to play hide and seek. During bedtime, we would act out all the fairy tales and storybooks together. And we watched so much Wizards of Waverly Place together that I would reference the scenes when I was giving them life lessons. At work, my performance was stellar, impressive, perfect even. And my boss was grateful to use me as an example of what to do. I was always looking to make people happy. I really enjoyed making people smile. There was no such thing as working too hard. I'd made my peace with it. I definitely did not date. Besides, I was married to my job and we had a pretty good relationship. Oh, there was this company picnic that I could not wait to take the kids to. They had rides, basketball, and fair food for everyone. I was so excited to get them out of the house and do something plain old fun. A good friend showed up, a coworker of mine. She brought her boyfriend, and he brought his best friend, Stephen. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined I would marry this man standing in front of me. They told me stories of their history together since elementary school. They went to Boy Scouts together. Their dads were scout leaders together. Their moms baked for the neighbors, and so on and so forth. But if I was not managing or parenting, I was a fish out of water. Needless to say, small talk scared the hell out of me. Stephen and I exchanged numbers, and we were excited to hang out. So he took me hiking on our first date, caving on our second. And one evening, he greeted me at the front door with a large bouquet of long-stemmed white roses. White for friendship. All I could see was red. Immediately, the rush of distant horror that I had pushed far behind me had reared its ugly head, and I could hear his words and I could smell the wood. My ears were ringing and I was so dizzy. I went first class crazy once the bouquet made it to my hands. I squeezed the stems so tightly that the thorns drew blood from my fingers. I withheld my tears, but looked into his eyes deeply and told him, "Leave and never come back, please." He was so confused and tried to calm me, but I lashed out at him again. "You're better than this. I have too much baggage. There is someone perfect for you, and it's not me." He left. But he came back that same evening with daisies. Stephen cupped my face and said to me, "It's unfortunate that we didn't meet earlier in life, but I'm here now, right in front of you, and it's time to make new memories." He pulled me into an embrace. And of course, I did the ladylike thing. I punched him in the face and slammed the door in his face. Because I just couldn't learn. But okay, so I told you guys we got married and we were super gross in love with each other, so I'll cut to the chase. After communication, patience, and trust, I finally got perspective on my personal growth. Taking a leap of faith into the unknown, trusting myself, believing in myself, and learning how to self-love were all because I took a chance to battle all my fears, not from the world, but the ones that reside in me. And I'm proud to say today that I am deserving of love, happiness, and even an evening on the sofa with my babies. That's all I have.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. And judges, please submit your scores. Timers, please submit your times. Again, we want to say, and I want to say thank you to all the, to everyone in the audience who's also been cheering on and encouraging our storytellers for the bravery in coming up here to tell their stories and their brave stories of overcoming the impossible as well. Let's see, and judges, if you will make note of a slight time penalty listed in the in your spreadsheet. But again, we want to say thank you to our judges that are here and lending us their time and their expertise to us tonight. So another one of our judges I'll tell you about is Florinda Flores Brown, a writer and educator from Laredo, Texas, now living in San Antonio. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Theater and Dance from the University of Texas at Austin and a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Goddard College. She currently works as Gemini Inc.'s Partner Classes Program Director. In addition to writing plays and fiction, Florinda performs live stories at various venues around town and is the co-creator of Stories Run Amok, a San Antonio-based live storytelling group. Thank you again to Florinda and all of our judges who are here tonight. And I'm gonna check the spreadsheet and looks like we've got our scores in. If our timekeepers are ready, we can go on to the next student. Okay. Let's see. Billy, are you ready to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Where are we at? Okay, great. Okay. Tonight, Billy Kiesel is sharing his story, Search for the Word. Take it away.
All right. Throughout the years, people have been searching for various things to satisfy their soul. People have scaled mountaintops in search of gold, attended mass in search of God, and hell, the government has been searching for Jimmy Hoffa for decades, only to find toxic waste in barrels dumped along the Jersey Turnpike. I've never cared for riches, the holy truth, or for some fat teamster who may have found himself buried 6 feet deep in sand somewhere out near Coney Island. Me, well, I've been searching for a song, an elusive song. I mean a good one, with a timeless melody with a hook accompanied by a band of angels. Many times in my life, I found myself searching from one end of hell to the next in order to conjure up enough material for the perfect tune. I've come up with hundreds of road songs, love songs, and songs about damnation, but not the perfect song in my opinion. Nothing like Mr. Bojangles, or The Wait, or Closer to Home. Those songs are timeless. You get lost in transit between the lines and eventually emerge like a phoenix when the chorus comes along. Yeah, I found myself in those type of situations many a time, if not in a juke joint out in Georgia, then in a roadside cafe in Mississippi that paid me in meals rather than in century notes. Life on the road isn't for everyone, from the shady venue owners screwing you out of your payment and the pushers around every corner trying to offload their Colombian product. The road can strip you of a lot of things if you're not careful. Babies were born and marriages fell by the wayside during these times. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for any of the births of my children. Duty called, and it was calling from stages in some rundown saloon somewhere out east. They call it the breaks, paying dues, playing to a crowd of 3, me, myself, and I. But onward I searched. With the downs constantly around the curve, many good times were loosely present. Too much of a good time, I guess. If I can't remember them, then they must have been a real good time. One day I spent a week loaded out of my mind in New Orleans. That's back alley jargon, so to speak. In a tavern called St. Roche over near the quarter. The fog was heavy, and you could hear the distant laughter of drunks parading around Bourbon Street. It was happy hour, I believe, but every minute is happy hour in the Big Easy. The owner of the venue was lost in his patrons, who by this time were loose-lipped from the infamous absinthe, a dangerous liquor that sneaks up on you like a thief in the night. No one could care less about the South Texas singer-songwriter who was about to play his songs on a half-assed stage. I didn't care if I was singing to a group of flyers, just as long as I got to play my music. I was hundreds of miles away from home, hundreds of miles away from family obligations and reality, but I learned to live in this void that seemed to suit me well. Onward I searched. Many a nights were like the Orleans gigs, dozen in attendance and no one listening to the music. At first I took offense, but as years went on, I learned to play for myself. It's like Ricky Nelson said, you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself. I had a great string of listeners out in Nashville, though. The boom was hitting hard on Broadway out there. The problem was that they wanted cover songs, and I could only sing Tennessee Whiskey so many goddamn times before I came fully sick of it. I would hit them with a cover and then quickly go into an original number. The owners of the venue didn't like that at all. They wanted the next big thing, a cookie cutter performer that has been done a dozen times before. And being from Texas, I was far from being cookie cutter. People from Texas carry our pride like a badge of honor. We carry it as if we're still defending the Alamo, standing tall against Santa Anna and his men. I quickly learned Nashville wasn't the place for me or my music. Nice place, but the Mexican food sucked. As a youngster growing up, aspiring musicians heard about Willie and how he didn't make it big in Nashville. Now he had come back down to Austin to reinvent the scene with a new set of rules. But as you get of age, you want to challenge Nashville and other major hubs known for their music scene and hopefully break through the walls or slip through the cracks somehow. I gave it a handful of years, wasn't satisfied. Hell, I gave it almost 20 years of my life and wasn't satisfied. I found I was just satisfied writing my own songs and playing them to myself. I let go of the idea of making it big. After all, if I made it big, I could only see myself getting into more trouble than what was allowed for an individual. At least that was my excuse. That spotlight shines bright, but it never shines on what I'm really all about. During all those hot days and cold nights, the hunger for finding a song was nagging at me. It was like a high when I would come up with something good, but with every high, one must come down. My catalog of songs is autobiographical. I am what I write. After years of being on the lookout, I have decided that I must keep searching. After all, once you find something, what else is there to do? It's like my dad always told me. If you start at the top, there's nowhere else to go but down. So onward I search, and I'll keep searching. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. Judges, please submit your scores. Timers, please submit your times. Great job, and we are thankful too. Everyone's making some noise in the chat for all of our students. Thanks again to our students for being brave and coming up here with your stories. And let me tell you about another one of our judges. Todd Wright received his MFA from the new school in New York City, and teaches writing for the University of Texas at San Antonio. He is the other co-founder of Stories Run Amok. He helps lead writing workshops for them and assists in putting together their live storytelling shows. He also writes and performs with Mark Gifford as Like-Minded Lunatics, playing live shows and posting absurd comedy bits on their YouTube channel. If he were a Muppet, he would be Guy Smiley. If he were a Beetle, he would be Ringo. And BuzzFeed Quizzes says that his spirit animal is turtle, just turtle. So a special thank you again to to Todd Wright and all of our judges for the short story slam. Let's see, and our lightning fast judges got their scores in. So if our timekeepers are ready, then we can meet our final student storyteller for tonight. Let's see, Skylar, are you ready to go?
Sure.
Okay, looking for.
I'm back here.
Here you are. Awesome. Okay, so Skylar Schreiber will be sharing her story called Growing Up, a trigger warning for physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. When you're ready, here we go. This is Skylar.
You're the apple of your mother's eye. You have your father's features. Your parents love you. It's just a phase. You're such a teenager. Growing up, you often hear things such as this from various people who think they know exactly what's going on in your life because they're older and wiser than you. The reality of my upbringing was that no one really understood what was happening under the surface of a father constantly in and out of jail for domestic violence and the appearance of a battered wife struggling to be the best single mother she could to her precious one and only child. My earliest memories of my childhood really only involved trauma. Everything else was overshadowed by the events I was forced to retell to multiple caseworkers and judges throughout the course of growing up. My very earliest memory is packing my favorite clothes and stuffed animals in my SpongeBob suitcase the night after my dad busted my mom's lip. I vaguely remember snapshots of waking up in my mother's arms throughout a seizure I was having as a result of shock. I remember waking up and walking to her side of the bed that night, suitcase in hand, saying, "Mom, let's get out of here." We stayed for 3 more years. I didn't see or talk to my dad much after the divorce. We had court-mandated family therapy once it was all finalized, during which time he had already developed a new relationship with a new woman and her 3 children. Our last counseling session involved my dad telling me bluntly that the more time he has to spend with me, the less time he has for his girlfriend and her kids. So over the next 9 years, I spoke to him about twice a year. I was accidentally running into him and his new families at places like Home Depot and the grocery store, and it was awkward. Looking back now, I can see how both of my parents struggled through this transition. I definitely saw the effects the divorce had on my mom. The woman I always turned to for support and comfort became the person that I found myself avoiding and running from. She became the source of so many issues and arguments. Sure, they started out as the typical controlling parent issues, but as I got into my teenage years, it quickly turned into emotional, verbal, and even physical abuse. Countless mornings, a vulnerable preteen would get dressed and ready for middle school, a jungle of daunting personality types and unique challenges. With the whisper of maternal support in her heart, she would come downstairs for the start of her day, ready to try her best to start off the day on the right foot, excited for change and the chance to try new things. She would turn the corner and look to her mother for encouragement and approval. "You look like a slut. You smell like a French whore. Wow, you really need to start watching what you eat. Aren't you going to do something to your hair? Why do you always look like a drowned rat? Are you trying to embarrass me?" Eventually, the comments begin to tear down the preteen, and as she becomes a teenager, the comments get worse, and depression sets in. "You don't know what depression is. You're not really suicidal, you're just being a drama queen." And finally, as she held a gun to her head and said, "What if I were to say I was suicidal and I were to shoot myself right now? How would you feel?" I prayed for forgiveness in my head as I heard myself think, "Do it. I wish you would." My mom did not believe in medicine. The closest I got to seeing a doctor was when I passed out on the floor of my school's bathroom, and the school nurse told her to take me to the ER immediately. She took me to a chiropractor who dabbled in holistic medicine and told me that I had PTSD from inside the womb. He prescribed me fish oil supplements to combat that issue. Upon being able to go to the doctor's office on my own, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and was told that I have little to no chance of ever having children. I wouldn't say that my relationship with my parents today is a complete 180 or a thing of storybooks. I will never have the perfect relationship with either of them. What I have realized with time is that everyone has traumas that they have to work through, and that does not exclude parents. Despite how the people who brought me into this world chose to handle their issues, oftentimes taking it out on me, I know today that they did the best they could do at the time with what they had. Understanding that it's not your responsibility to handle other people's traumas and that you can only control yourself and your own emotions makes it easier to move on in life. It's easier said than done to accept people for who they are and try to move on. But if I could go back to the moments where that preteen was contemplating suicide, wondering if life would ever get any better once she was on her own, I would love to tell her that she was right. I would love to tell her about her future career, her marriage, and the 2 dogs that light up all of her days. Things do get better, but you have to give them the chance to. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. And let's see, and that is our final storyteller for the night. Thank you again to our students who have been preparing for tonight. Judges, please submit your scores. Timers, please submit your times. One more judge that I'd like to tell you about is Victoria. Victoria Guerrero is an administrative specialist for academic success at San Antonio College. She is an alumna of Texas State University, where she served in the Honors College, held office as Secretary for Student Life, and graduated with honors from the School of Communications, minoring in English while working part-time at the university. She has been published in Young Pegasus, wrote for the Advocate newspaper, competed at UIL before concentrating on writing nonfiction novels and webcomics. Victoria enjoys reading, spending time outdoors with her 2 chihuahuas, and sewing in her leisure time. So I want to say thank you to Victoria and all of our judges who have been here tonight. And we will do our, we will have our final storytellers tomorrow night. So be sure to tune in right at 6 so we can get the show rolling. All of our students, you did a fantastic job getting up here on the Zoom virtual stage, and we will reconvene tomorrow.
Can we do some unmuted clapping now?
Yes, everybody, now is the time to make some noise.
All right. Great job.
Yay, great job.
Wonderful. Fabulous, everybody.
Terrific.
Ooh.
So good. So good.
So good.
Oh, powerful, amazing stories, amazing storytellers.
Hmm. Judges, you have your work cut out for you, no doubt.
Did any of our judges want to say anything before we sign off? Or anybody from LCR committee?
I'll just say briefly, if I can.
Yeah, go for it, Todd. Go for it. Yeah.
Yes, that I could see not only that the storytellers were in brave moments, but also the listeners sometimes in brave moments, just to stay on screen, to witness what they were witnessing, and to try to give something back. They were feeling pain and try to give something back to that storyteller. So, I mean, a lot of good stuff tonight. So, just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I still remember the first time I went to Slam, and I was terrified, and but I mean, I was so excited to share my story, but also wanted to. It was in in a room of strangers, you never know. But I think that, like all of these stories that we heard tonight, we all have our challenges, our obstacles, our adversity that we come over and overcome, and that we all have so much to share with those around us. And to answer a question in the chat, yes, this will be the same Zoom link for tomorrow. So you can also find it again on the SAC Library Common Read website.
I just want to
Alrighty.
make one special mention. Mr. Stephen Dingman put forward this book, The Moth, and got the committee together and put it forward to the folks and asked them, I think this would be a good book for our first Library Common Read. And I have to say, it's probably one of the most powerful books we could have used for this first Library Common Read. I think it really helped us all connect to the students here at the college and listen to your stories. Everybody has a unique story, of course, but that's often lost in this time, in this day, in this age when we're very disconnected and we're in our own space. To hear stories like this and to be drawn into a very intimate space and to share what you have gone through and to listen to these stories, immensely powerful. Wiping my eyes a lot tonight, but it's wonderful that you're here to tell these stories. It was just very powerful, very impactful, very beautiful. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Enjoyed it immensely. And come back tomorrow night, everybody.
I sure will.
Yes, please do. Please come back tomorrow night.
Yeah, bring your friends.
And bring your friends. Yes.
Yeah, all righty.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you all.
Good job, guys. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Doris.
Thanks, Joseph, for helping out.
Thanks, Joseph. I counted 48 once, Eileen. I think that's the highest number I saw. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I've saved the chat. I'll send that out to our instructors.
Oof, powerful stuff. Jeez.
Yeah. Love seeing books in the background.
Yeah.
Love seeing.
Well, Di, you did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Great job, Don.
Thank you.
Excellent facilitation. Very well done.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it is so much different on Zoom, but
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
but thank you,
well.
everybody. We, in fact, let's see. I think it's just us that are here. It looks like, yeah. So we had a question about the timing, because let's see. One of the students went to 6 minutes.
Mhm.
by our official count, that would be that would actually go all the way to a 0 in that category. But Chibi had also said, I guess in other other slams, they do the point deduction from the absolute final score. And so, and that it may have sounded that way from how we announced the time before. So I think we can just figure that out.
I think that's fine, yeah.
But yeah, that way we can, because I'm trying to think, I think it hurts worse. I'll try to figure out exactly which way it hurts worse, like if the penalty is on that category alone or if it's, and so that's what, I think we can just touch base by email to discuss.
Yeah. Which one went 6 minutes? Was that Billy?
Desiree.
Desiree.
Oh,
Yeah, and everyone else was in time.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping for a couple of funny stories.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
It's like, it's tugging at my eyes. So, it's like, I mean.
That's
Yeah,
hard.
you want to mix. You kind of want like a crazy drinking story in Alaska or something weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like maybe we should put a sacrifice at the end who has a funny story.
Like maybe the haunted freezer in our book or something.
Yeah.
So just real quick, does that mean that we should